can't believe I'm about to say this about The Fisherman's Return, but I Know What You Did Last Summer, the brand new Legacy sequel, is actually a perfect Legacy sequel for this horror franchise, and I genuinely didn't think I'd be saying that. Like, wow. One of the biggest surprises of the year so far, and genuinely one of the biggest surprises when it comes down to horror. I thought this was going to be fun, but man, it gives the original a run for its money. That might be blasphemy for some of you who have absolute deep-rooted nostalgia for that original. I enjoy that original one so much, but this one I absolutely loved and had a blast with. What's going on, buddy? Welcome back to a brand new movie review. Today I'm discussing I Know What You Did Last Summer. This, of course, the 2025 released I Know What You Did Last Summer. I know they have the same title. You know how these legacy sequels like to do it. About when 5 friends who inadvertently caused a deadly car accident, they cover up their involvement and make a pact to keep it a secret rather than face the consequences. But of course, 1 year later, the past comes back to haunt them as they learn someone knows what they did last summer. Stalked by a mysterious killer, the Fisherman, they soon seek help from 2 survivors of the legendary Southport Massacre of 1997. That's all you need to know without going into this movie. I would say stay as far away as you can from the trailers. If you have not watched the trailers yet, I stayed away from them. And God, am I happy I did. I think that trailer spoiled too many of the kills. I think it gave away a little bit too much of the plot. And I honestly found myself a little bit surprised by how good the movie is. I don't think I was surprised by how good the movie was. Like, I always thought, like, this would be a fun concept. But a lot of films and a lot of studios are trying to cash in on what franchises can we bring back, what cast members are still alive, what characters were still alive in some of those movies that we can get back. And this seemed to be one of those films that, like, they just always talked about, but, like, are you going to be really able to capture the essence? And genuinely, the reason that I think this is a perfect legacy sequel is for 3 massive reasons. 1, the original characters that do come back in here, and we'll definitely talk a lot about them without spoilers, of course. I thought they actually did something with them. It wasn't the generic thing that they're just back to help. They actually lean and do some things that I was a little bit genuinely surprised by. And they do things that would make sense for a horror film. And I love that. Like, it's more of a realistic approach, but the usage of those 2 really, really worked. So that's my number 1 big reason. A lot of times when you see these legacy films, it feels like sometimes they don't know what to do with the original actor returning or the original actors returning. So I'm very happy that. Second, it really much cements its own roots with this, with its brand new characters, to the point where if the original 2 weren't in here, honestly, I would have been fine with it. But they fit well enough into the story, but it is really the new characters that I am genuinely interested in. I think they have some of that Gen Z humor, of course, and kind of that Gen Z banter, but it's funny, it's enjoyable, and for the most part, I really bought into their friendship, which is something that I really bought into the original one. And you can really feel that just in the small little instances and the small moments that you get at the start of this movie. But my third and biggest reason to why this is a perfect legacy sequel, but it actually captures the essence of the original 1997 film. In fact, it captures the 90s, the late 90s slasher films, like almost perfectly. And a lot of that goes to director Jennifer Kaylan Robinson, who I think did an amazing job directing this movie. And that for me is like one of the things that I was really honed back in, because a lot of these films now got to have added technology with phones and maybe the killer's using something of that nature. And I've never really cared for that. I think sometimes it takes away, and I think it's really hard to build a slasher film now in the modern genre. But thankfully, I Know What You Did Last Summer knows exactly how to capture that. And it does it in a really good way. Like, to the point where you almost forget that it's taking place in modern time. Yes, I absolutely love this movie. I genuinely had an absolute blast with this. And again, as I'm calling it perfect legacy sequel, I know there will be people who have issues with this movie. I know there will be some ballsy things that they do in this movie that people will definitely have questions on. I think All those reasons is the reason that I was so surprised by this movie and honestly how they framed this entire film. So I'm definitely excited to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. So make sure to leave your thoughts down there. Hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get back to this review overall. Of course, with jumping back into the review, let's talk about those performances as I mentioned. So the newer cast, of course, Madeline Klein absolutely just like wipes across the show and just steals it as Danica. I think a lot of her lines and just the way that she portrayed herself was absolutely just top tier as the blonde in a horror movie, and I love that. I think she plays it up to such a great T. Chase Suey Wonders, who was phenomenal in the studio. If you have not watched that this year, it's one of the best shows of this year. Might be possibly my second favorite. But Chase Suey Wonders was great in there, and she's amazing as Ava. At first, I thought, a little bit something I've seen before, specifically from some of the characters in the original I Know What You Did Last Summer, but I ended up really liking her. Same thing goes for Jonah Howard King, who plays Milo. Also really damn good. Tyreek Withers, Teddy Spencer, again, might feel a little bit familiar to the original cast. Rounding out our 5 friends is Sarah Pigeon, who plays Stevie Ward, who again is another character. There is background to all these characters. There is development to each and every one of these characters and something that they're going across. And I think a lot of what is given here is while the performances are actually the best part about it, and maybe we could argue that some of the dialogue and some of the surface level attempts at character development are there, it's the performances that genuinely actually made me care about them, and it's really much their chemistry that makes the film great. Because a lot of these horror films, if you'll see a group of friends and you won't believe that they're actually friends. This one you genuinely do for just even, again, the small amount of runtime you get with them before the shit hits the fan. As I've mentioned throughout this, I was really impressed with how they brought back Freddie Prinze Jr. and, of course, Jennifer Love Hewitt, and who are both iconic in their own right for the original film, specifically Jennifer Love Hewitt. But for me, the usage of them in here, again, starts kind of cliche, but it really dives into something that I started to really get into. And when we look at it, I'm going to use Scream as an example. I really liked 5. I loved 6. But 6 didn't need Courtney Cox. It could have honestly been its own thing. 5, for the most part, yes, the nostalgia aspect of bringing back Neve Campbell and David Arquette and, of course, Courtney Cox was great. And you would, of course, want to see them back. Like, that is one thing there. Nostalgia is something that definitely fuels this movie as well. And we'll talk about nostalgia in a second. But sometimes it felt like when you watch those movies that they didn't really have much to do. And I really appreciated what the director decided to do with them in here. It's something that I didn't expect, but it works. And it really, really made me happy with the surprises of what they did with that. And again, speaking about the nostalgia thing I just mentioned, that is one thing. Having them back is a piece of nostalgia. Nostalgia is a parody kind of piece of this. And sometimes I Know What You Did Last Summer can be a little bit meta towards the nostalgia aspect of what the franchise is. And that's always been, again, something that can either get in the way of a movie or can really much push the film a little bit further. And I think the nostalgia aspect of this movie actually works because the film is so much built on the lore of Southport itself and what has happened in Southport and how everyone just forgot about it, that bringing these things up and bringing these elements back up actually remind the audience not just of that nostalgia, but reminds the city of its roots, which is something that the film builds its own roots in, but doesn't forget where it came from. It doesn't forget what made it so special back in the 1990s. It remembers what it is, and it brings that to a brand new time, which again is something that a lot of these legacy sequels don't get. I think some people will be a little bit disappointed in certain choices and reveals in here, and that's just the cause of it. It's always different to see what people actually want from these films and what people don't, but for me, I like that this one actually attempted to do something different. Which, speaking of, the Fisherman in here is 1,000 times more brutal than he was in the original 2 films. He is awesome, and I love the usage of him in here. He actually felt scary, and I could see him potentially being an iconic slasher once again. It felt like he never got that justified take, and I feel like there might be time for him to actually come back and do this. It's just the time, maybe it's my age, maybe it's everything around this, but I Know What You Did Last Summer really leans into that, and this is one of those reasons that why this film works for me so heavily. It might not work for you. I genuinely have barely talked to anyone else who saw this movie, so I could be in the complete minority. But God, I had so much fun watching this. And that is a big piece of why this film bumps it up for me the most. Very much impressed with Jennifer Robinson's direction here, and I think that is one of the things that really, again, bumps this film up. The kills were awesome. The cinematography was great. The performances were excellent. And I overall really love the dialogue, even if it does get cheesy or cliche or very Gen Z. But that's the thing, is that, like, that's my era. I was born in 1997, and, like, again, watching that film is here and there as I grew up, and I'm watching it with my wife consistently at our age now. There is a little bit of nostalgia here where this film was just like the perfect time capsule for me, and now this one's kind of coming back and really surprising me with what it was able to have and honestly develop in its own self. Very curious to see what people really think about this movie. Like, honestly, like, I think people are going to think I'm crazy, but God, I had so much fun with it, and I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm genuinely surprised. Down to nitpicks too. And especially, like, as I've already mentioned, I think some people have issues with some of the reveals here. One thing that I really liked about this is that I always kept playing around with what and who it was. And for me, I actually felt pretty satisfied with the reaction and where this actually ended up going. To be honest with you, I never really felt that in the original two films. This is the first one in the franchise where I felt satisfied with the reveal. And that's one thing, is that I always remembered back in the day, like when you compared this to Scream, Scream was always also the more satisfying one, but it feels like lately, like if I compared this, the reveal of this compared to the last two Scream movies, I'm more satisfied with this one overall. Again, gonna be a debates on that, I already know, but that is one thing, and I really like that. Not saying that it's like clear and evident who it is, or that it was predictable or shocking. There's things in there that, for me, it's always fun to play around with, like, the different ideas you have in your head as you watch these type of movies, where you're like, oh, it's got to be this person. Oh, wait, it's got to be this person. And as certain things play out, it starts knocking it bit by bit. And plus how they're able to add, like, people to the story felt very seamless. Like, it didn't feel like, oh, this person's just getting added to get killed. No, like, they're adding people to the story that add and flood in certain stuff in there. Maybe people won't like the reveal as much, or the mystery itself. I liked it. I think the only nitpick I can really pick apart is the ending feels a bit rushed. Like, the third act itself, like, the film is almost 2 hours. And it very much felt like the third act was the chopping block for certain things to get us to the resolution. And that, for me, is the one disappointing part about I Know What You Did Last Summer. And maybe disappointing is a stronger word, because I still liked the third act. I just expected a little bit more from it personally, but it really didn't take away from everything. I just kind of like, there's a couple jumpy points in the third act where I was like, okay, that was very quick. It really feels like we should have probably lingered on that for like a little bit longer, but I digress. I cannot wait to see this movie again. That's where I say, I Know What You Did Last Summer is sexy, slick, and just flat out awesome. Bringing the charm from the 1997 original, but developing it into a highly entertaining, perfect legacy sequel that actually builds its own path while bringing a satisfying return for its roots. This is the biggest surprise of the summer so far. Like, I genuinely love this movie. I cannot believe how much I'm saying that. Like, I went into this movie, like, honestly exhausted, having a really rough day. My 8-month-old is killing me, and my wife, like, just all the crying and trying to just satisfy him so much that I went into this film, like, really much not in the best mood, and I walked out having an utter blast. Cannot believe I'm saying that. I have my nitpick of the ending. It's a little jumpy. I would have liked a little bit of a stronger conclusion, but God, I love the reveal so much. And man, I love the fisherman in here. I really think this is a special movie. There is one post-credit scene. I highly recommend fans of this franchise do stay for it. I thought it was pretty satisfying, and I'm excited to see the debates on that. But again, with all that said, I'm going to give I Know What You Did Last Summer an A-. Thanks so much again, guys, for watching this. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and comment down below your guys' thoughts. And of course, until next time, stay classy.